The precarious balance and the high stakes diplomacy, the grim realities of the war in the Middle East as three more hostages are released from Gaza this morning. The question remains, is this an uneasy truce or merely a pause before the inevitable return to conflict? And certainly the trigger happy Israeli Knesset is the hawks in the Knesset would be only too happy to get back to fighting. And since the start of the ceasefire, 16 Israeli hostages and 5 Thai nationals have been freed in exchange for roughly 700 Palestinian prisoners. And this morning, Sagui Dekel-Chen, Sasha Trufanov, and Yair Horn were handed over to the Red Cross, marking the 6th such exchange under this truce. Their release was met with scenes of jubilation in Tel Aviv, but also with the sobering realization that their ordeal is far from unique. This fragile ceasefire has hinged on a delicate quid pro quo, hostages for prisoners, aid for compliance, but the underlying truth is that both sides have continued their game of brinkmanship, each testing the other's limits, threatening collapse, while simultaneously extracting further concessions. Today's hostage release was not merely a humanitarian gesture, it was yet another demonstration of Hamas's brutal psychological tactics. A chilling moment occurred, for example, when Hamas operatives handed an hourglass to Yair Horn, a sinister reminder to the mother of another hostage, Matan Zangauka, that time is running out to secure his release. This sort of calculated cruelty is emblematic of Hamas's broader strategy, and the group has carefully staged each handover, forcing emaciated hostages to thank their captors, parading them before cameras as trophies of war, rather like people leaving the Big Brother house. It's a deliberate exercise in humiliation designed to exert maximum emotional pressure on the Israeli public. The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu finds himself caught in a political vice. On the one side, there is mounting pressure from the extreme right, figures like Itamar Ben-Gvir, who demand an immediate return to full-scale war. On the other, mass protests in Tel Aviv have urged the government to uphold the truce, prioritising the safe return of the remaining hostages. Netanyahu's ultimatum to Hamas earlier this week, demanding more releases or a resumption of fighting, was a high-risk gamble, and the reality is that Hamas has little incentive to surrender all the leverage at once. As the negotiations inch forward, therefore, it's likely that further brinkmanship will ensue, with Hamas continuing to weaponize its remaining hostages. And then there's Donald Trump. Never one to miss an opportunity for grandstanding himself. President Trump declared that all hell is going to break out if all the hostages are not returned at once. His endorsement of a renewed assault on Gaza emboldened Netanyahu's critics, the far-right critics, and added yet another layer of unpredictability to the situation. But beyond the political posturing, there's the broader strategic dimension. Arab states are scrambling to draft an alternative proposal for Gaza's future, fearing that Trump's rhetoric, which includes talk of expelling Palestinians and turning the Strip into the Riviera of the Middle East, is inflaming tensions further. Looking ahead, the second phase of this ceasefire, set to begin in early March, remains highly uncertain. The proposed next step is the release of 59 more hostages, including those considered less critical by Hamas, predominantly young men who are not considered humanitarian cases. Yet, even if this phase proceeds smoothly, the fundamental question remains: what happens after the hostages are freed? Will Israel accept a long-term truce, or will the war resume in full force? With Netanyahu's government at war with itself, Hamas are unyielding in its demands, and international players such as Qatar and Egypt scrambling to keep diplomacy alive, the entire situation hangs on a thread. And the problem is that there's this brinkmanship going on all over the place. War breeds war, and this cycle of distrust breeds distrust, not only between the two combatants, but also within the respective communities. For now, the ceasefire holds, but just barely. The dynamics at play suggest that unless a comprehensive agreement is reached, this pause will soon give way to renewed hostilities. What we need is an enveloping sense of peace. And peace can be as infectious as war. The spectacle of hostage releases, the posturing of political leaders, the broader strategic interests of external actors all point to a single grim reality. Neither side has really compromised. Neither side has really given way. They've merely paused the game. And in war, a pause is not the same as peace. A ceasefire is not an objective.